Warm welcome to the programme, and today's guest is Yochanna Darling, who is the Head of Mission at the International Christian Consulate. Warm welcome to the programme, Yochanna.
Thank you.
It's been a while since we've done a programme. I think it was 3 years ago.
3 years ago.
Back in 2016 when you actually shared your incredible testimony and what the Lord's got for you in terms of helping Christian refugees in Europe in particular. But for the sake of this programme, can you share again your testimony, how you came to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ?
Okay, so I've had a close relationship with God since I was really, really small. He's brought me through a lot of challenges in my life, and he's really taught me who he is and how he does what he says he will do. When I was 14, he gave me a vision, and that vision is now in fulfillment in the work of the ICC. And when I was 14, he showed me pictures of Christians from the Middle East being beheaded and taken into captivity by people that I'd never seen before. You know, I didn't know what a Muslim was. I'd never been to the Middle East. I'd never met anyone that looked like what he'd showed me. But then in 2015, I started seeing what was happening in the Middle East with ISIS. And the things that God had shown me as a teenager, I was seeing on the TV. So I knew it was time to start doing the work that he'd called me to do, and here we are.
Amazing. And how did the Lord give you the name, the International Christian Consulate? And how did the vision for this organisation take off?
So when I started seeing the things happening on the TV that God had shown me as a teenager, I was getting more and more agitated because I knew that now was the time to do what he was calling me to do. But I struggled to express this to people around me. So I asked God, please give me the words to explain to people what it is that you're asking me to do. And his response was really clear. He said, I want you to establish my consulate for my people from the Middle East. And that word consulate was perfect. It wasn't something that I thought up myself. It was a word that God gave me to use for this work. And if you think about the fact that Christians are citizens of the kingdom of heaven, and a consulate is a representation of one state in the territory of another for citizens that are in trouble, then you kind of begin to understand the picture that ICC is about. So the International Christian Consulate is for citizens of the kingdom of heaven who find themselves in trouble and in need of help and support in a foreign land, and they can't go to their own consulates for help.
Excellent. And can you give some sort of context? Because really what we're talking about is supporting Christian refugees who've fled the genocide, that's the only word really I can describe, in the Middle East, committed by ISIS and those linked to ISIS both in Syria and Iraq, and have found themselves in Europe. But can you share with us maybe some of the harrowing stories of some of the Christian refugees that you look after and take care of, and some of their personal stories?
Okay. So I think probably most of your viewers will be aware of what's been going on in the Middle East with ISIS. That seems to have died down a bit recently, but actually the persecution's been there for a long time, and I think it will continue to be there for a long time. But some of the things that the Christians that come to us have experienced are really, really awful. So, for example, I could tell you about a family with 2 young girls from Iraq, and these girls were 11 and 4. And they were taken captive in Iraq with their mother by ISIS affiliates. And their mother was killed in front of them. This is a Christian family, taken because they're Christian. So these 2 little girls witnessed the murder of their mother, and then they were held hostage by this militant group. And their father had to sell everything that he had in order to buy his children back and flee the country. And they came to us and were in quite a traumatized state, as you can imagine. There's also stories of people who have lost friends. So I know a Christian guy from Syria, and he was in the army, and he was fighting against ISIS, and his entire platoon were butchered by ISIS, and the only way he survived was by hiding in the dead bodies of his friends. And then he had to flee Syria, and he said, the only way I got out of Syria alive was because God was protecting me. There's stories I could tell you of teenage boys who decided to change from Islam to Christianity. They wanted to follow Jesus, and they lost everything. There's one boy I can think of right now who he was probably 17 when he made that decision, and his father and uncle took him away, and they were torturing him. His body is covered in scars. He's got knife wounds all over him from his from his father and his uncle. His own family did that to him. He ended up unconscious in hospital because they were trying to change him back to Islam. And when he woke up in the hospital, as soon as he could leave, he got out and ran and fled to Greece. So he's lost everything. So this is, you know, people are giving up everything to follow Jesus.
Amazing. So let's have a look now at the incredible work being carried out by the International Christian Consulate.
ICC has been running a Safe House programme in Athens since 2016. It's for persecuted believers from the Middle East who are under serious risk of harm because of their faith. Many have been forced onto the streets with nowhere else to turn. Almost all of our beneficiaries are Christian converts from Islam, so they can really find themselves in danger in refugee camps and other facilities, even here in Greece. After being in survival mode for months or even years, our safe houses provide a place of sanctuary and peace and the ability to sleep without fear. Families with shared experiences of serious persecution are able to support one another and gradually get back up on their feet again and find hope. In Galatians chapter 6, it tells us that we should do good to all people, but especially those of the household of faith. And that's why our day centre for Christian refugees in Athens is called the House of Faith. The House of Faith works alongside our Safe House programme to provide the support and the pastoral care that those in our Safe House programme need to access. It's very difficult for Christian refugees to access mainstream refugee centres because the same people that were persecuting them in the refugee camps are also in these day centres and other refugee facilities, making it incredibly difficult for the refugees to access the support that they desperately need. Unfortunately, it means many of them have nowhere else to turn, but that's why ICC is here. The centre is a real haven and it's become a real community. We have people from all across the Middle East, from Syria, Iraq, Kurdistan, Iran, even some North African countries like Morocco and Egypt. It's really a big family. We have Bible classes 3 times a week, which are very popular and very well attended. And it's been a real privilege to watch these Christians grow in their faith and become stronger and stronger. The centre provides a safe place for people to come and meet together, worship together, share with one another, support one another. But it also has several facilities which are really, really valuable for the people that come to us. So we have showers and washing machine facilities for those that can't access those. We also have Greek classes and English classes to help them integrate into the local community. We help them with CVs and how to find jobs and adjusting to European workplace culture. These are all really valuable, important things that help them to gain confidence and be able to stand up on their own feet again and build a life here. It's been really beautiful to watch believers who have suffered so much for their faith become stronger and stronger and grow up to such an extent that they are now able to help and support others that come to the centre. They're able to give back what they received, and this is a really beautiful thing, and it's really working in creating a strong community here, a community of believers that reminds me very much of the church in the book of Acts. Everyone sharing together, meeting together, worshipping together, all equal as one. Everyone having a different thing that they can bring and contribute. We've seen faith exercised like I haven't seen in the UK. We've seen healing. We've seen joy in the midst of great suffering and loss. And we've seen a real deepening of relationships, which is always really valuable and really important in growing together as a body. One of the most humbling things is seeing how these people who have given up everything to follow Jesus, that they're still laughing and full of joy and with a bit of support and community. The persecution hasn't broken them. In fact, it's made them stronger, and that's a real privilege to be part of.
Really inspirational work there. So important to support those Christian refugees who find themselves in the midst of turmoil, both from the Middle East and now in Europe. Yochanna, we have to really put into context really that in 2015, the summer of 2015, 250,000 migrants had arrived in Europe, and then 124,000 in Greece and 98,000 in Italy. And for a single month in July of 2015 was 107,000. What is really driving so many of these refugees into Europe? Is it the fact of the ongoing civil war in Syria and the violence caused by ISIS? Is it the collapse of these Arab states, or is it just many of them seeking a kind of new economic life and new opportunities, or is it in some ways also a little bit more sinister with a kind of population transfer known as in Arabic as hijra?
Mm-hmm. I would say that actually it's probably all of the above. There are people who are genuinely fleeing from war or from violence or from persecution, but there are some that have more sinister intentions, as you mentioned. Actually, one of the questions that we ask people that come to us is quite a subjective question, but we ask them, in your opinion, what percentage of refugees in the camp would you say hold extremist or radical views? And you have to understand the context where the Middle East is basically Islamic, so Islamic law is normal. So the responses that we get are actually quite concerning. We hear regularly estimates between 50 to 80% hold extremist views. So there is an element of that, but there are, of course, many people that are fleeing terrible, terrible situations. The destruction in Syria is horrific. The things that are happening across the Middle East, not just in Syria and Iraq, but also Iran, Afghanistan, northern African countries as well. There's a lot of really bad things happening. So I think these are drivers to the migration, but then as well there are also a lot of economic migrants. So there's really a big mix.
Yeah, no, I thought there would be. And in terms of how you established the International Christian Consulate in Greece, is it because the largest number of Middle East migrants are in Greece because they use Greece as a means to get further into Europe that you decided to set up your headquarters in Greece? Yeah,
so there are two main entry points into Europe, one being Greece, the other being Italy. Most people coming from the Middle East come through Greece, although there are some from Africa, but most people coming from Africa go into Italy. So because God asked me to set up the consulate for his people from the Middle East, I went to Greece because that's where people from the Middle East are mostly coming through.
And what conditions did you find when you got there?
Oh, when I first got there, people were saying to me, you won't find any Christians. And at the beginning I thought, well, there must be some because God's told me that there are. And I did find some, but because of the things that they're experiencing, not just in their home countries, but also in Greece, they're hiding. So the things that Christians are facing are very difficult. I mean, it's difficult to be a refugee anyway. The conditions in the camps are appalling. I wouldn't wish anyone to live there. They're really bad. But when you add on top of that persecution, and I mean serious persecution because of faith, for the Christians, it's almost unlivable. It's a desperate situation.
So let's hear some personal testimonies of those that Yochanna has been able to help and to rescue and provide a safe haven in the midst of that awful trauma.
Do you have any problems with the Muslims as a Christian here in Greece?
Yes.
And what's it like in the camps for you if you were in the camps?
I know. And one night when we worship together, it's very loud. Muslim, Iraq, and Kurdish is coming to my camp, my connects, and say if now is leave to this camp, I fire the connects.
I told the people I'm Christian and I stay in the island, in the camp. They destroyed myself.
In the Islam said if you change your religion, if you're without Islam, you're infidel. And infidel is something they can't do anything with them.
We are kafara.
They hit me with bottle. I believe Jesus and I am not like them.
Many people, they just want to kill you.
He said, if I have a sword, I kill them all.
He wanted to kill me.
If he kill me, done. It's nothing happens. No one know that.
We don't feel safe. All my time in camp, I am in room. I didn't go out because it's very, very dangerous for me. I am Christian, so it's very, very bad time. I can't speak with anybody.
And the Muslim people attack them and against them because they're Christian. We don't have a freedom.
I was very scared and no one can help me.
In the time that he was in the camp, he was the only person that was Christian in that camp.
داشتیم کتاب مقدس می‌خوندیم شب بود توی کانکسیون.
And they were reading Bible and it was night time.
تقریباً 20 نفر 30 نفر از مسلمان‌ها اومدن گفتن شما باید کشته بشید دیگه داستانی که خودت می‌دونی.
And suddenly 20-30 Muslims came in front of their door and said that you have to die and you are Christian and all these things.
They done everything bad thing to me with name Jesus.
The Christian people in this country, there is in danger.
The Christian people, they can't stay in the camp. This is a big problem.
And that gives us an insight into some of the horrific conditions and the intimidation, the bullying, and also the threats of murder that are targeting those Christians in the refugee camps in Greece and other parts of Europe. Yochanna, some very, very sad and horrible stories there that you managed to record with those people that you're helping. But how is it that, for example, that the European Union has allowed these refugee camps to come up and not distinguish between Muslim and Christian refugees, knowing that even the ISIS members have been caught up with the migrants from Syria, and many of them actually run and control these camps. So can you share with us how the situation has been allowed to develop and why there hasn't been a separation of Muslims and Christians for the protection of those Christians in particular?
Well, it's a bit of a hot potato. In Europe, people want to uphold these ideals of non-discrimination, and this is one of the biggest problems in not dealing with these issues. So when we've spoken to people from the government or we've spoken to people from UNHCR, they don't want to touch this issue because they say, well, we shouldn't discriminate between religions. Okay, and even though we explain to them, there's a significant protection issue here, it's something that they find very challenging and they don't really want to deal with. There's also a naive assumption that when these people come from the Middle East and they come into Europe, they will immediately want to embrace European ideals, which is just not realistic. So it's been really challenging to address this issue and to implement some changes. We have had some good conversations with UNHCR's protection team in Athens, and they have listened to us, but whether that will make any significant changes, I don't know. I've yet to see that.
So you're really saying that political correctness is kind of the driving force of the policy behind the EU's and the UN's policies to look after the migrants. Now, what happens, for example, if Christians are actually being killed at these camps? Does that then change the situation, or...?
Yeah, Christians being actually killed doesn't happen very often. There are threats daily. And physical attacks, knife attacks, gang rapes. Actually, gang rape is used instead of murder because if you can't kill the body, you kill the spirit and the mind through rape. We've had numerous cases of both male and female gang rape. One of the guys in that video was gang raped because of his faith. They said, we can't kill you, so we're going to rape you instead, and then you'll change your mind and you'll turn back to Islam. So it's a different type of murder, if you like. These things are really serious.
So those leaders of these camps, because I take it that there isn't much police protection around them, everyone's left to their own kind of devices, so there is actually a kind of police enforcement in these camps. So whoever's the strongest group or the most dominant group will actually then dominate the actual camps, as it were. So do they take a different viewpoint from those that are generally Christian refugees and those that have converted from Islam to Christianity? Is there a difference in the way they treat them?
It's much more dangerous for people who have changed from Islam to Christianity. I would say the majority of Middle Eastern Christians in the camps currently are converts from Islam, so their lives are at significant risk. For Christians that have been historically Christian, it's less so, although they're still treated as second-class citizens in the camps. But certainly for the converts, it's extremely dangerous.
And are the authorities aware of this? Because there should be something called freedom of religion in Europe.
Yeah, we've tried to make them aware. I think there's the opinion that this is something we don't really want to look at. This is something we don't really want to deal with. I'm frustrated by this because there is no freedom of religion in the camps. In the video clip that you saw one of the camps in the area around Athens and you heard the Islamic call to prayer. This is normal. And the camps become microcosms of the Middle East, and the same problems that happen in the Middle East happen in the camps. So when you've got a vast majority of people who are Muslim and holding views that are, we have to kill the Christians, especially those that convert from Islam, this is the dominant position in the camp, and anyone that finds themselves in that camp is really under significant risk of harm.
So can you share with us the actual process? So you have a Christian refugee from the Middle East, turns up in Greece, ends up in one of these camps. How long are they in these camps, or do they try and then escape from these camps and try and go into Europe? Just explain the kind of process of how they end up being in Britain or Germany or France.
Okay, so there's a lot of refugees that are in camps for years. In Greece, they place geographical restrictions on asylum seekers. Sometimes those restrictions are lifted, but a lot of the time they're trapped in these camps. In some cases where the persecution gets too bad, they actually are forced to flee the camps and then they find themselves on the streets. So there are a lot of homeless Christian refugees now as well because they're not able to stay in the camps, they're too dangerous. The smuggling business is huge in Greece, as you can imagine. So those that find themselves on the streets, they've got no access to housing or services because they're on the streets. So they find themselves in an impossible situation, and sometimes they feel that they have no other option but to use smugglers and go to another country. Yeah.
So let's have a look now at the plight of some of these Christian refugees and particularly what they fled from in the Middle East as we look at this trailer for Faith Keepers.
The current status of Christians and other non-Muslim minorities throughout the Middle East is the worst it's been in centuries.
21 people were killed when a powerful bomb exploded in front of a Coptic Christian church.
Muslim mobs began attacking Christian churches.
They are targeting churches, temples, cultural and historical sites.
سوريا وأنا لك بخاز شو سوريا جو العراق قتل خله
يعني أخذوني بالقوة واغتصبوني وتقريبا 4 أيام 5 أيام رجعت للبيت. هو كان بسيارته راجع من شغله، لزموا إيده ورجله ورايدوا يقطعوا راسه.
I converted from Islam to Christianity. I was arrested, and after that they gave me a death penalty. What I told the judge in this day, if loving and worshiping Christ is a crime, I am guilty as charged.
The Christians of Iraq and Syria who fled ISIS narrowly escaped a genocidal campaign of mass murder, of crucifixions, and of beheadings.
Now we are here in Inkawa Center for Youth. We have here 186 caravans, 260 families here.
What is taking place in the Middle East, particularly in Iraq, is genocide.
They call this ethnic cleansing. This is the real word.
The administration is failing, the Congress is failing, and quite frankly, with all due respect, the church is failing.
In response to persecution, I always want to tell people to pray. Stop, pray, be burdened for your brother and sister, but get involved in the fight and help.
And doesn't matter how small is your voice, you can make a difference, even if you are just one person.
And it's astonishing to think that these Christians have been on the verge of genocide or genocide taking place by ISIS, come to Europe and now being persecuted as well. What is being done in terms of the authorities cracking down on some of the ISIS members of these camps? Is anyone looking into the investigation of some of the very dangerous and I would say scary views held by many of the leaders within these camps?
I'm not aware of anyone doing anything about it. We have had conversations with the Foreign Office. We've had conversations with people in the Greek government, the British government. No one seems to be doing anything. I think it's a challenging topic because people don't want to talk about the fact that there are extremists coming into Europe. I think it's something that people don't want to generate fear and panic about. And we do have to be balanced in how we see things. We do have to understand that there are Muslims coming that are not extremists.
Absolutely.
But from where I'm standing, from what I'm seeing, I'm not seeing any action on this.
So from what you're saying, Yochanna, isn't there a great danger then there's a big radicalisation process that's taking place within these camps? So,
definitely.
So many of these refugees are coming over, would probably call themselves kind of nominal kind of Muslims, only because that's a faith in their background, escape to Europe because they feel that Europe is free, and then they're being radicalised in these camps to convert to the dangerous form of Islam, which is represented by ISIS and others.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I've heard refugees say to me, I knew some of these people back in Syria or Iraq, and when I met them in the camp, again, they were much more extreme in their Islamic views than they were back in their home countries. Radicalisation is definitely happening in the camps. We've heard stories of people in the camps sitting around campfires singing jihadi songs.
So in your opinion, in order to not only protect these refugees, particularly the vulnerable Christians and also the moderate Muslims within these camps, how also then is it vital that our European leaders and governments understand what's happening here? Because not only is this a threat to these minority groups within these camps, but this also poses a national security threat to that of Europe.
I think this is a very important issue, and I think it's something that most politicians are afraid to even look at. I was encouraged by Jeremy Hunt's review into Christian persecution. Whether that will go anywhere, I don't know. We did actually have the opportunity to contribute towards that. But I think generally politicians are afraid to address this issue. I don't think that anyone's really doing anything about it, and I think this does pose a problem for Europe, and one day, sooner or later, we will have to address it.
And also, you were telling me before the programme that the vast majority of the refugees are Iranians and
amongst the Christians.
Amongst the Christians. Are they like born Christians, or are they converted to Christianity on their way to Europe?
No. All of the Iranians that I have come across that we've helped, they were all born Muslim. And in Iran, basically, is like a badge. So a lot of the Iranian people, they would say that they're Muslim because that's what they were born as, and they don't have the choice. But there's a lot of stories of Jesus appearing to people in dreams. There are people who come into contact with friends who go to underground churches. They receive, I don't know, a copy of the New Testament and begin reading, and then they decide, actually, I would quite like to follow Jesus. But when that happens, they have a significant risk to their lives because it's illegal. As people who are born Muslim, it's illegal to change to Christianity. And so there are a lot of people who become Christian in Iran and then find themselves in very difficult situations where they have to flee the country. But there are also people who are too afraid to make that change in Iran, so they leave the country in order to become Christian, to pursue their freedom of religion.
Amazing. And can you share with us what it's like with your group? Just share with us kind of daily activity on behalf of the International Christian Consulate in Greece?
I'm really in awe of what God is doing. I mean, we're a very small charity. We don't have very much support, but what God is doing is beautiful. We have in our day centre a real mix of people from across the region. So we've got Christians from Iraq, Iran, Syria, Afghanistan. We've had people from Morocco and Egypt, and they're all one because they're in Christ. So they're brothers and sisters. It's a big family, and what God is doing is just, it's really beautiful. I'm watching them grow, and they're growing fast, and they're so hungry for the Word of God. They're eating their Bibles, but also that they're putting that into practice. They're producing fruit. They're flourishing in the gifts of the Spirit as God gives them. We've had healings. I mean, people in this country would probably be surprised to hear that we've had people who have been healed of stage 4 cancer, for example. We had one guy who came directly from the hospital, having been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, being told he had 4 months to live, in floods of tears. And everyone gathered around him, and they were all praying, Arabic, Farsi, Kurdish dialects, just together as one. And he was healed, completely healed. And now his life is changed, and he's growing, and he's maturing as a believer. And I could tell you lots of stories, but God is really doing something. And I really love sitting in the Bible classes, surrounded by people from across the region, and thinking, I'm sitting in a room full of people that represent all the ancient biblical empires. So you've got people from ancient Assyria, Medo-Persia, Babylon. It's amazing. And yeah, what God is doing is beautiful.
And what have you learnt in particular from these remarkable people?
I've learnt that persecution is not a bad thing. I mean, it is a bad thing, but when God uses it, our faith can be made so strong that we can withstand anything. And persecution is a refiner's fire. And out of that fire is coming gold, kingdom treasure. And I can't tell you how humbling it is to witness that.
And how are the children getting on?
The children are doing well. I mean, they're quite resilient. They've been through a lot. So I could tell you stories of little children who've had knives held to their throats. They've been threatened with being burnt alive. They've been threatened with being kidnapped and taken as brides, children taken as brides, in order to bring them back to Islam. But they're resilient, and they love Jesus, and they're just part of the family. They're part of your family.
Amazing. And can you also share with us how many safe houses have you got? What is the capacity of the number of Christian refugees you can look after at any one time? And how do you keep them safe from the violence that is all around them?
Okay, so we have 8 safe houses with a maximum capacity of 80 beds. Of course, we can't always fill all of those 80 beds at once because we have to be aware of who we have in each safe house. So if we have a family, we can't put single people in with them. So there are restrictions in that. But we keep the safe houses very under the radar. So people don't know where they are unless they're in them. People have to sign contracts to make sure that they're not going to share information. And we also have a security consultant who makes sure that everything is kept safe. They're supervised, we have lots of measures in place.
And how relieved are they to be in your safe houses from the refugee camps? Maybe share a couple of stories with us.
I wish I could capture it on video for you.
That would be good.
I'll give you an example. We had 2 families. They were in one of the camps, and they were meeting together in their little cabin just to pray and worship together, read the Bible. And they were attacked late at night by a gang of about 40 or 50 Muslims. They were shouted at, told that they had to die. The women and children had knives held to their throats. The whole of their container was being threatened with being set on fire, and they were told, you have to leave right now. It was a terrifying experience for them, and this was after time of being persecuted generally in the camp. And they fled from the camp and ended up on our doorstep. They found out about us through their pastor, who was in contact with another pastor in Turkey who knew about our work and contacted us. So there's a bit of a network going on. But they arrived, and they were very traumatised. And when we told them that we have safe houses, they were in tears. They were completely relieved that there was somewhere safe, and that our day centre was only for Christian refugees, so there were not people coming in that would persecute them again in the day centre, never mind in the safe houses. The relief is tangible. You can feel it.
So let's have a look now at some of the conditions in in the biggest refugee camp the migrants find themselves in Greece.
It was only a sudden rain which lasted for 20 minutes. However, it was more than enough for refugees and migrants who strive to survive in Moria, Lesbos. Many tents flooded, streets were filled with mud. Farishta Yusufi from Afghanistan came to Moria 4 months ago with her husband and their 2 daughters. The 20-year-old woman argues that life in Moria is unbearable. We live in a tent which is not big enough to protect us all. When it rains, water drips inside and we cannot sleep. Our life is full of problems. We have to wait for hours in line for the doctor. When we go to get food, we waste our time because we have to wait for so many hours. There is no heating or electricity on the hill next to the refugee center. This is why refugees who live there call it the jungle. Some do whatever they can in order to prepare for the winter. Kilara Eskil was an actor in Afghanistan and took part in 7 films. He left his home country because of poverty and deadly violence. Now he only wants a better future for his children. I'd like to work again in the movie industry, but I don't really have a preference or a choice. I need to work in order to feed my 2 sons. I want them to study. I want to offer them a good life. Getting a job is the most important thing for me.
And that gives you a little bit of an insight into what the conditions are like, particularly at the biggest refugee camp in Greece. Can you describe that camp? Have you visited it, seen it, and what the conditions like, and what have you seen for yourself?
This camp I went to visit in November last year, and it's horrific. It's really, really bad. It's probably one of the worst camps I've ever seen. In fact, no, it is. You have raw sewage running between the tents. It's very dangerous, it's very overcrowded, massively overcrowded. For Christians in there, they can't access help at all. It's a very dangerous place. It's a very, I can't even find words to describe it. If you visited it, you would be shocked by what you saw.
And I suppose one of the big questions is, have you been able to receive any help from other kind of Christian NGOs and other organisations that are really designed to look after Christians who face persecution, but particularly on our doorstep in Southern Europe?
We haven't had very much support at all. We've had support from a very wonderful organisation in America. We've also had some support from a Jewish organisation in London. But apart from that, we haven't had very much support at all. In fact, we've had a lot of opposition from Christians, particularly in the UK, who say to us, why are you helping the Christians? You should be helping the Muslims, or you should be helping everyone. But that's not what God called me to do. So I'm doing what God has asked me to do.
Amen. Yeah. And share with us again what the Lord has called you to do, which is really, really giving a lifeline to these Christians who've faced unbelievable persecution in the Middle East, genocide, survived genocide, and now facing persecution again in Europe, which, to be honest, this is somewhere where they shouldn't face persecution at all.
So the word consulate just sums it up, really. It's a place where people can come to find safety and to find support and help. But what that looks like is more discipleship, it's family, it's community, it's building one another up, and most importantly, providing safety. A safe place to stay and a safe place to meet together, a safe place where they can read their Bibles and pray and worship and grow in their faith, and also to help them stand back up on their feet again. So a lot of organisations are helping by handing out food or clothes or whatever. We try to help refugees who come to us become independent so that they're not reliant on handouts. The Bible gives us examples of biblical welfare, if you like. So when God told the Israelites to leave the edges of their fields for the poor, he didn't say, cut it down, grind it, thresh it, make it into bread and give it to them. He said, leave the edges. So they had to go and actually harvest it themselves. There's dignity in that as well. When the widow approached Elisha and said, please help me, he said, what do you have? He didn't say, what don't you have? And she had a small bottle of oil, and he said, okay, so go to your neighbours, collect your jars, collect as many jars as you can gather, and then exercise your faith and pour oil, the little oil that you have, pour it into all of the jars, and then take those jars and sell them. So there's a principle there that we use to teach the refugees and to help them to stand back up on their own feet again. And many of them are doing that. Many of them are beginning to learn the Greek language, find jobs, get registered for tax and other things like social security. And they're finding their own accommodation and beginning to rebuild their lives, which is really important.
And is there a warning here for Christians in the West, particularly this apathy that we're seeing among so many Christians with the danger with what's happening to Christians in the Middle East, particularly now with these migrants as well that have come in and the Christians caught up with them, and the violence they're seeing? Is there a greater danger that Christians in the West, particularly in Europe, are unaware of with the rise of radical Islam that's sweeping across the continent?
I'm actually very concerned for the church in Europe, especially in the UK, because I'm from the UK. The apathy that I've seen is gutting. When Jesus comes back, he's going to judge the nations based on how they've treated his brothers and sisters. That includes Christians. Okay, so when I see Christians in this country not interested in the plight of their own brothers and sisters from the Middle East, I'm concerned that this nation is heading towards being a goat nation. And I don't want to see that happen. I want to see believers in the UK rally around their brothers and sisters and support them, and not just look the other way and say, I don't want to hear about it because it's too difficult. I don't want to think about persecution on my doorstep. It's not coming here, I'll just keep it away from me, because these are the kind of attitudes that we've come across. I'm very concerned. Very concerned.
Yochanna, down to the last 3 minutes of the programme, so I've got two very important questions I need to ask. The first one is, you're actually teaching many of these Christian refugees Hebrew, and they're coming with a tremendous love for Israel, and you've had Joshua Aaron, the wonderful Messianic worship leader, visit them as well. So can you share with us their love for Israel?
So these believers are eating their Bibles. I mentioned that before. And they very quickly realise that Israel is a very important part of their Bible. And the countries that they've come from are pretty much all anti-Israel. They're enemies, they're supposed to be enemies of Israel. But these people are not. They love Israel. And every single one of them, I think, has said, I want to go to Israel. We were, in December, holding an intensive Hebrew course, which was actually run by Spirit Ark, which is a Jewish Hebrew organisation in London, which was fantastic. They were asking us for about a year before that, can we have Hebrew classes? So they came for 2 weeks, every single day for 2 weeks, and learned Hebrew. And by the end of that, they could communicate basically in Hebrew, which is amazing, because you've got people from across the Middle East speaking Hebrew with each other. We celebrate Shabbat on a Friday evening. And they all sing Shabbat Shalom. They love the candles. We've got one of the guys who can translate the Hebrew blessings from Hebrew to Farsi. They love it. And Joshua coming was a real blessing. I asked him if he would come, and he said yes. And it was amazing. It was amazing to have people from places all over the Middle East singing in Hebrew with a Messianic Jew from Israel. It was fabulous.
So how can our viewers get behind you, Yochanna, to support you in the brave and courageous work that God's called you to do, and the huge difference you're making in the lives of so many of these Christians in these refugee camps? It's just astonishing, absolutely astonishing.
Well, the first thing that everyone can do is pray. We need prayer. It's very dangerous sometimes, the work that we're doing, and it's on the front line, and it's very hard work. We need your prayers. We need prayer for protection, for discernment, for wisdom, for provision. Pray for us. And of course, support us financially if you feel led. We do need your support. We don't have very many supporters, and this work is really important. No one else is doing it. So those are the two main ways that you can help.
Yochanna, thank you so much for being my guest on today's Middle East Report, and thank you for your bravery and your courage.
You're welcome.
To put yourself out there in what is a very dangerous situation, but also for helping these Christians who face genocide in the Middle East are now facing persecution in Europe, where they should be safe and free from persecution, and actually providing them with not only safe homes, a kind of stable environment, but also a place where they can learn and study the Word of God. So thank you so much for being my guest today. And I want to thank you for watching today's programme. I mean, our hearts must go out to these Christian refugees in Greece and across Europe. We need to pray for them. We need to stand with them because they face genocide and now they face persecution here in Europe by the same oppressors. So let's do all we can to support the work of the International Christian Consulate, and let's keep them in prayer. So we leave you with this song, which is sung by Joshua Aaron, who's one of Yochanna's favourites. So thank you for watching today's Middle East Report.
גדול אלוהי, שירו כי גדול אלוהי, כל אחד יראה כי גדול אלוהי. ראוי להלל, ליבי ישיר כי גדול אלוהי. שם מעל כל שם, אותך ראוי להלל, גדול אלוהי. How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God, and all will see how great is our God. כל אחד יראה כי גדול, גדול